We're in the book of Ecclesiastes, the third chapter, where is a wonderful chapter to be looking at. I want to just to say these question number 7 and 8 to kind of get us to the point where we're for our lesson today. And we're trying to see what causes us to fear God. And I notice in verse 14, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Now I want you to get the finality and all the dimensions of these statements. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God hath done it, that man should fear before him. So why should people fear before him? God has set things before us that we may not be able to change. When he sets it forth, we cannot change that. That doesn't mean, am I chosen to be saved or lost? Eternity. You think like a Calvinist and I can't do anything about it. Is there no free will in the matter? Is there conditions that we find people in the Bible praying, Moses praying for his people, God determined to destroy them? He doesn't change, and yet he changed in the sense of allowing people to be forgiven of their sins. So we've got to take all what God says on the subject, but here's the point is that there are things out of our control, and God's in control. And we can't add to it, we can't take from it. We do our best to maybe cope with it, trying to see what we can do in honoring him. But remember, this whole book is trying to see what is life under the sun, and if you take God out of the picture, it becomes very frustrating, because Solomon puts it in there. And what we begin to realize is that here's God's way. Like when God's going to destroy Israelites with the Chaldeans, wouldn't anything change that? He was going to do. He had been forbearing. He allowed them to repent. He had done all those things that God does with the free will of man, and him being just, and he still remains just. But it's frustrating life when you think you're in control of everything and you realize you're not. And how many times have we realized that? There's just some things that hit you, and we're not avoiding it. We have to work through it, but we have faith in God, indeed will help us. So in verse 15, that which hath been long ago, and that which hath been long ago been, and God seeketh again that which is passing away. And we say, well, how does history repeat itself? Is that a true concept? I think this passage says that. That which is hath been long ago. That which is now has history behind it. But who's bringing it to our experience? Well, just history repeats itself. Solomon puts it, God says, I'll bring that up. Here's your experience. And God's behind that. James tells us, we're making plans, we're going to do this and go do that. And what does he say do? If God wills that we do what? Live. He's in charge of, if I drop dead now, he's in charge of when that is going to happen. And we can do what we can to stay healthy. We can do what we can to avoid traffic problems and danger and that sort of thing. But there comes a time, as we'll see in chapter 8, there comes a time to die. And I just want us to realize that this does not mean it takes away our free will. We can't change events that happen in our life. We can do that with prayer, and God answers our prayer that helps us get through a difficulty. But if it's straight and he laid it out there, that's the way it's going to be. And if it has curves in it, that's the way God's going to be. And if you take God out of these verses, you begin to realize that this becomes very frustrating. And then, but at the same time, under the sun, we talk about history repeating itself. Who's behind that? God brings it from the past and brings it to our experience. He's eternal. We're not. And man's nature has not changed. Circumstances around us have changed. We have modern technology that the people of old didn't have, but the man is still flesh and blood. He's still greedy. He's still self-serving. All of those things are there that we have to work on as Christians. But God is in that picture. I just want to establish that. Now, question number 9. What should come for us when we see injustice in the place where justice should be. Are you experiencing that in your view of life right now? In our culture, in our events, if you see injustice, well, that ought to be where justice is going to be. The courts are going to do that. And we're seeing, for the first time in my life, things weaponized, and you get political enemies, and you take one down, you let the other one live. And say, oh, how could that happen? Well, it happens under the sun. God allows that to happen. And I want us to think about that when we see this, because what will be the way to be wise in our day and time when somebody's being treated and they're maybe doing the same thing, and the other a guy doesn't get caught? Justice, just let him out of prison, let him kill somebody else. Well, my daughter died, my son died, and you see, that doesn't seem to matter to people. And whether they care or not, it's reality here. So when we see the place of justice, that wickedness is there, the place of righteousness, that wickedness is there, I said in my heart, what will God do? So I'm having this, and it seems like this is not right. What do we know is going to happen one day? Yes, sir. Yeah.
We realize that these people that are doing things wrong and abusing our judicial system, they will pay for it.
Yeah. And so, well, there's a cop-out for you. You got God there, and it's your crutch to live on. But the point is that he's made this statement about himself, and it answers a lot of questions. And you're exactly right. We live in a very limited time frame. I just talk about things in my life. That's just a blip of history, that things don't even know we're repeating, and all those things. Knowledge is limited. But we live in our time, and if something is, especially in our time when we want things done right now, gratification now, it is especially frustrating because we may not see things corrected in our time. But to David's point, God's eternal, and there'll be a time, it may be a time in history, where God will bring about the justice that is due. And Haman, what was he hanged on? One he made for the other guy. And God has a way of doing that in time. And we call that poetical justice. That's poetic justice. It's irony maybe, but it's just he deserved it and that sort of thing. But the point is that God does work in time, but we know there's going to be a final judgment where all will be judged, and we'll be judged by our works. Even Christians will be. So that to me is there's a time for every purpose, for every work. Now, let's take that and let's answer the modern atheist. It's been, it's for decades now. Those who want to reason, and they'll take the Bible and want to reason, thinking that here is the idea of God's sovereignty, that if God is so sovereign, why does he let injustice prevail? He's holy, he's righteous, he's a righteous God. Then how come, if you think he's so sovereign, that he allows that to happen? And I think this passage has an answer to that. David. That's right. He's eternal. Yeah. And his sovereignty will be in his time, at the end of our time. And what do we know? Every knee will bow, won't it? Nobody's going to escape the judgment. All those offenses, like in the city of Houston, the problem with the police department, they were allowing people not go prosecute cases of sexual abuse, and there are 4,000 of them. They just put a number in there and it says, well, not enough people to work the case. So they don't have those. What about those that have been victims? Will they have their day in court? It ain't happening until things change. But what's going to happen? Person that raped that girl, the person that murdered that person, and nobody has done anything about it, those people will meet God in judgment. And wonder if they go through life and they die and they never went to prison, they never paid any fine. To die twice is bad. You died physically, but what's going to be the next death? You'll see God's sovereignty when he cast those who are unrighteous into hell, fire and brimstone and all those things, and that would be everlastingly so. And let me out of here. You can't get out. Well, I want to. No. God is sovereign. So I think the sovereignty of God is answered here in the fact that God allows you to do your free will. Sometimes injustice prevails instead of justice. Sometimes you don't see that in the affairs of men in government. But in the end, God will take care of the injustice that's done. And look at it from the other standpoint, why do we have to worry about sin? What is sin? We just manufactured. It's a 3-letter word, just manufactured. I just think, well, we don't do right, whatever the culture is. But we know we stand before not only a righteous God, but a holy God, right? That's the problem with sin. And it was such a problem in Romans 3 that he had to give up his son to die for us. That's how bad sin is, that it took the death of his son to allow God to be a justifier of those who have faith in Christ and to be just with sin. Romans 3, just and justifier. His grace, justifier. He wants his creation to be saved. But sin is our problem. It would not be a problem if you had no law, because if there's no law, there's no sin. And it would be a problem if God was just an old grandfather up there and not holy. He's holy. And therefore, sin becomes a problem. And he's going to not sweep it under the rug. He will give an account. That's why it keeps Christians faithful and keeps us holy, because we know the sovereignty of God. Yes, he's allowed me to make my choices, but his sovereignty is going to be seen, back to David's point, is in his time. And there is a time for every purpose and for every work. Okay? Any comments or questions on that? On question number 9, what should give us comfort? And how do you get over the death of someone that's so innocent and people so wicked and they're taken from you? Comfort is to know that God's in control and God will judge, even if they never get it out of cold case file.
I think there's also a caution there in my question that if we fall into the trap of being revenged like the other, that we're doing just like they have,
Right.
not realizing that the Lord will exercise vengeance upon those. We don't need to do that.
Yeah.
But the Lord will.
And again, that allows you to be more forbearing and patient and all those things. And those are qualities of a Christian. That's true. And that's the anchor. And I think that's why the wisdom of God and New Testament teaching, there's our anchor to go through these difficulties of life. And we're getting ready to see a lot of them in these 2 chapters. What does God allow? What does God allow has a purpose for making us to see we are like beasts. So we're looking at injustice and so forth. So now he says in verse 18, I said in my heart, so that point we've made, it is because of the sons of men that God may do what? Prove them, test them, want them to see something that's important to them by testing, that they may see that they themselves are but as beasts. So you don't have an immortal soul. You're just like your cat, your dog. They have a spirit, you have a spirit. And that's what our Jehovah's Witness, they love these passages. You're just as beasts. And so what do you do when you realize what people are going to say? You look at a context. Let's just see what you come up with for the, because the next verse is 4, explanation. That might be the first point. I want to consider this. Does that mean that, even though I got passages, you're created in the image of God and a dog isn't? But what is it that we're like beast? And he explains it, and see if this helps us deal with when you have error coming across. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Comparison. This may be something like this. He may be answering our question. Even one thing befalleth them. I must be getting close. As one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they all have one what? Breath. Now, does anyone they all have one soul? You got spirit and soul. I understand that. You go back and get into definitions. But God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life and became a living soul, a living person. And what do we have in common with the beast? We give up our spirit and we die. That's what happens to our cats and dogs and our animals that we love. There's a point that they expire. they quit breathing, and blood's not circulating in their bodies. And we are created. All the animals were created from the dust of the ground. We were. But we were made in his image. That's a distinction. So what's the comparison here? Well, we give up the spirit just like they do in death. Does that mean I don't have a soul that's made in the image of God, and that it's destined for eternity? I realize, is it just breath, or does the spirit return to God who gave it? And we go to the dust, as we'll see in the end of the book, and begin to realize there's more to man than just an animal. And all he's bringing out here is the fact that we die the same way. Yes, sir.
Verse 21 makes a distinction. The spirit of man goes upward, whereas the spirit of the beast goes downward to the earth. Upward to God.
Well, okay. This passage says I don't know where it went. We don't know if it went upward or downward. I agree with your point, but doesn't it say, who knows if it goes upward or downward? I'm just asking here. Let's look at verse. Who knoweth the spirit of man, whether it goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast, whether it goeth downward to the earth? That's a question, and the point is that you don't. You don't. I see people die. They actually die, and I can see the spirit. And whether and your point is exactly what we think. Well, the difference would be that we go, our spirit goes to God who gave it, and he'll say at the end, and the animals don't. And that may be true. That may be a principle. But here, he's just asking the question I think we don't know. That's why it's like it. We don't know which way it went. And we're like the beast in that regard. But to your point, we'll see something else later on. That's good. But there's the point being like the beast. He's still hitting on that. Not that we don't have a part of us that will continue on, and he'll cast both our soul and body in hell. After we die, he will cast both our soul and body in hell. We are spirit, soul, and body. That's what we're made of. And yes, we have a soul that we share with the animal kingdom, in the sense of being that part that word soul enlivens our body. So I think the breath would be a part of that part of us, but we also have a spirit that's made in the image of God. And you add something here. I remember debates with the Seventh-day Adventists, they have these same views. Do you ever see a spirit going out of existence? Talking about in the Bible, angels are spirits. Do they go out of existence? No. Our spirits, do they go out of existence? Well, spirit's separated from the body, spirit's going to be united with the body, go to hell for everlasting. It never goes out of existence. Could you say then you have an eternal soul? No, you can't say that. Nowhere in the Bible does God say that you have an eternal soul. And that's the argument that they make. But what spirit that's come, it goes out, it's just our body decays, and we're not breathing anymore, but the soul, death is simply a separation. And talking about for years, I've never seen where one does. The spirits go. They go into, even demons. They went into animals. The animals died. Pigs died. They pass on. You can't see them, and you don't know. They try to do tests. Well, is the body a little bit lighter after the point of death because you could weigh the spirit? That hadn't worked too well. And it's just that invisible things that are truly there. And but see, that's the point. You could stay there and teach someone where your concept is wrong, because all he's talking about here is that we share with the beast the idea that we both our breath departs from us. And that's not dealing with our eternal soul. Now, we continue with that. So as one dies, so dieth the other. They all have one breath, and man hath no preeminence above the beast. So, yeah, I do. He has no preeminence. What's limited by context? Because God says in Genesis 1 that all things have been placed under the foot of man. All creation has. That's all your beast. Well, the Bible contradicts itself? No. Why no preeminence? We die just like Rover does. And so, well, that's just dead all over. And you stay dead. There's no part of you that continues on. There's the back and forth argumentation that is given. But the preeminence above the beast is not disallowing, I made you in my image. I placed you over the beast. You do have preeminence. And when the New Testament argues, well, not everything's under his feet yet, it's in the context, you haven't conquered death yet until Jesus conquered death, and now you will one day, when he comes by, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. And that's when we'll realize that final victory. We already have it in Christ, but that will be at that time. So these are just hitting, again, life under the sun. And if you look at animals dying, you see people dying. You don't know where the spirit went upward or downward. You can't see that, but you know death has occurred. Separation, not annihilation. It hasn't annihilated the part that continues on, which sometimes spirit, sometimes it's soul. But a lot of times when you see soul, spirit together, you got to learn, how do I contrast those? I mean, Hebrews says it's hard to divide the spirit and the soul, but the Word of God can. And you can't divide that. So sometimes those terms are interchangeable, but sometimes they're being distinct. You're made, may your spirit, may your body and your soul and your spirit be preserved entire at last. So what's the body? Well, that's this. So in that case, what is the soul? It's our breath. And the spirit is that which we're created in the image of God. God is spirit, and we're created in his image. And that brings in that truth that the New Testament acknowledges. That's part of our makeup. Now, when Jesus became man, he took on flesh and blood. Well, animals are made of flesh and blood. Got different types of blood, all that sort of thing. They're different. But the point is that we're like them in so many ways. But that doesn't mean you're a monkey's uncle, okay? It doesn't mean that. Other thoughts? Yes.
To jump off the cliff and say this says that humanity is nothing but beast totally negates verse 17. Verse 17, there is a judgment.
Yeah.
If we're merely beasts and we die like Rover, then that negates any judgment
Yeah.
that God may have.
That's true. And we have a conscience, don't we, too? Dogs I've had hadn't had a conscience, I know. they didn't seem to be bothered by anything like that. Yes, sir.
Similarly, he's saying we have a conscience. If you look at James 4, you see that the Spirit dwells in us, yearns jealously.
Yeah.
For God, for the righteous.
And that's our inward man makeup and stuff. That's a good point. Okay, so we got the beast. So how are we like? How are we like beast? How are we different from beast? And I hope we've answered that. And now question number 12: what is our portion that we can take from this life? Again, he's coming back. You got all these injustice and all those things. How we're going to look at things. But let's just deal with verse 20. All go into one place, all are of the dust, and turn to dust again. That's like a beast. Well, we're just not a body turned to dust. Well, he's not hitting that here. We're a spirit. Yeah, he'll take care of that in other chapters. But he says, of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man, whether he goeth upward, the spirit of being, whether he going downward to the earth? We don't. Wherefore, there's nothing better than a man should rejoice in his works, for that is his portion. For that is his portion. What does he add to that? We've seen it. Your portion is the joy of the works, joy of the fruit of your labor. We've seen that part. Just enjoy your works. That's what you produce. But that means you're going to put everything into it, which we'll see in Ecclesiastes. When you do that, everything will be the best that you could ever do, and you ought to be rejoicing in that. But what does he add here that we can learn from as well? And we'll answer that with this. What facts should cause you to enjoy your portion today? Not wait till you retire or something. Yeah? Well, that would be part of that. But for who shall bring him back to see what shall be after him? If you let all this go, who's going to bring you back? So I think I'll rejoice in it now. Will it happen? No. And we leave this earth, and there's no skill in Sheol where we go. There's no knowledge. That's limited in a sense. You're not going to use your knowledge and how you put things together and how you do things. You won't be doing that sort of thing. Last night at this facility, we had an opportunity to see for a long time. There's one of the people in that facility. He's taken his wheelchair apart and put it back together again. And the nurse said, it still don't work. But his hands were dirty. He'd been working on that, and I was just there for, less than an hour, I think. And I saw him work on that thing. Then he sits in it, but I heard that he had taken it all apart. Well, he won't be doing that in the grave. He's got skill to put it back together again, or lack thereof, and he does all that work. Nobody's going to bring you back to fix that wheelchair a little bit better. You're not going to have any skill, knowledge where you're going, and you're not going to be coming back to see those things. Now, I remember as a young man, when I go to grandparents' funerals or grandfathers' funerals, that especially grandfathers I'm close to, when they died, I thought they'd be looking at me. Maybe I had a guilty conscience. I thought, Granddad's looking at me, I better be good. That he's interested in what happens on this earth. No, nobody's going to bring him back to see me. That you remember things in the next stage, but the idea of coming back to this earth live this life. They're not interested. They're interested in remembrance of people when they understand eternity. I'm not saying that, but to come back and see the affairs that are going on, nobody's bringing them back for that. We're gone. And we have other things to look forward to there while we still remember this life and put it in perspective. And I think one of the reasons why those who have known the truth and turned away from it, it's going to be tougher in judgment. They knew what they had and how reality was there. And they let that go. And I just think that's been a comforting passage to me. He said, maybe he ain't looking at everything I'm doing. That because he's a spirit. And has no limitations anymore. So you kind of think, well, he's looking over and seeing everything that's going. That could be good, that could be bad, but that's not happening. I think this passage kind of indicates that. And the point of the passage, that's just my reasoning from it, but the point of the passage is enjoy it now, because that's all you're going to get out of life, and you're going to let that go. If you don't enjoy that, in the next life you won't be looking back and say, oh, it's gone. You leave behind your possessions, you'll belong to somebody else, or it just goes up in smoke. And you know that before you leave. But it's not that you're hovering over things and everybody's looking at in the spirit realm and looking at you, and they have that kind of view of you. That's what, as a young person, I was scared of that. I should be scared of God, because God does, doesn't he? And that's the one I need to be dealing with. But the people that love you, so I always thought about that. Okay. Question number 14. Question chapter 4. Here's where you get into observations of life under the sun, and I can sympathize. Thank you, Marvin. I can sympathize with people who says life is just depressing, and because that's the point that's being made, but it's not a depressing book, because we're going to see the positive way of looking at things, and that's what we're doing in these sections. Chapter 4 and verse 1, I returned and saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of such as were oppressed. So we've already, chapter 3, injustice. Now we're looking, all right, people are crying, and they're the oppressed ones. Injustice has been done. They had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors, there was power. So that takes me back to chapter 3. They got the power, I don't. And I'm being oppressed, and they did injustice to me. That can be a depressing point. Verse 2, wherefore I praise the dead that have been long dead more than the living that are yet alive. Yea, better than them both I esteem him that hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. So here we have two questions. What did the writer see in life that caused him to praise the dead? Again, it shows you don't come engage with the affairs when you leave this life, or you couldn't say that. What happens to the dead? Yes. What are they praising? Right.
In the way some people like to try to comfort themselves, if they have some kind of achievement, they say, well, my loved one, they'll be looking down from heaven. Well, they may think that, but the Bible doesn't back that up.
Yeah. And they didn't have to experience having no comforter and being impressed. That is very, very true. Now, I know our time is short, but look at verse 2. Does the writer praise suicide in certain situations? Better to be dead than to suffer the injustice with nobody around you to comfort you? Does that open up? Well, maybe suicide is okay. It's better. People can think that way. Is this passage encouraging that? Well,
There are people who see it that way.
that's true. But they didn't help their situation. No. And you get into suicide. I just think the greatest example from God's perspective was Job. He was in pretty bad shape, wasn't he? His even friends were against him. His wife said, curse God and die. You put your trust to him. He's not helping you any. All those factors, no comforter. And here we find that there's the situation they're going through, that Job could have been one to take his own life, but he didn't do that. And God is going to bless him double amount at the end of the book. And that tells me that God doesn't want us to take our life. We experience things in life, and we learn from them, and that becomes the good part. Yes, sir.
Nothing is said positively about Judas' suicide.
Right.
It's more of a condemnation.
That's right. That's a good point, too. And a lot of times we learn lessons and we cut ourselves short if we take our life. But that's kind of the way people kind of look at these sometimes, and I think we'd have to have that discussion. Those are good points to bring about. We'll stop there. Anything you want to add to that? Suicide is a subject of its own. But in our society today, that would be the way they reason, wouldn't they? It's better to go there. And just in passing, it's better never to be have existed. Is that really true? That's better than someone who's experienced life and all the bad things and or that who's now died and experienced things? They would have no existence. And he's not saying that because they wouldn't exist. How would they be better? They don't exist. And he's just trying to show how bad life can get here, and when all those things happen, and that's the work done under the sun, and we need to realize there's injustice there, but God takes care of that in the end. We'll have to stop there. Thank you very much.